The concept of mounting anti-aircraft guns on tank chassis came to the forefront in 1942 due to the declining control of the skies by the German Air Force. Initially, the Panzer IV chassis was chosen for this purpose, and a prototype vehicle was armed with a 2-cm Flakvierling anti-aircraft gun. However, the armament was considered too weak and improvements were sought. In early 1944, a modified version was introduced, equipped with the more powerful 3.7-cm Flak 43 anti-aircraft gun. The Flakpanzer IV served as a mobile anti-aircraft platform intended to protect German armored units from enemy ground-attacked aircraft. With its upgraded armament, it provided a temporary solution to meet the immediate need for improved anti-aircraft defense, although its design had a number of flaws. The early German attempts to create a self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicle based on a tank chassis were not successful. These early proposals relied on vehicles that were not yet in production, and due to the strained German production and industrial capabilities, introducing another type on the assembly line was deemed wasteful. Consequently, these projects were abandoned quickly. In May of 1943, various German Army commissions, including those focused on armament and tanks, convened to address the issue of the general lack of suitable anti-aircraft protection for the panzer divisions. The utilization of a cupola-mounted 7.92mm machine gun was considered ineffective for this purpose. Strengthening the anti-aircraft armament on the existing tank turrets was also deemed impractical. Half-track anti-aircraft vehicles, which were already available in numbers, were also found to be inadequate due to their insufficient protection. Thus, the only feasible solution seen was to develop an anti-aircraft vehicle based on an existing tank chassis, and Krupp was officially awarded the contract for this project in June 1943. To expedite the development and production process, the design was intended to be as simple as possible. As an interim measure, the armament would consist of a 2-cm Flakvierling. The crew in the anti-aircraft gun would be shielded by 4 hinged armored walls. However, in practice, lowering the sidewalls would consume valuable time and leave the crew exposed to enemy fire. And later iterations of anti-aircraft panzers featured almost fully protected turrets for improved crew safety. The prototype, called 2-cm Flakvierling auf Fahrgestell Panzer IV, was completed by the end of September 1943 and presented to German Army officials for inspection and evaluation. The Flakpanzer IV prototype was essentially a modified version of the Panzer IV tank, reusing its hull and suspension with minimal changes. The most significant alteration was the introduction of a larger rectangular-shaped superstructure. The machine gun ball mount was removed and replaced with a machine gun firing port, protected by a round cone-shaped cap. This was like a plug connected to a chain, and when in use, the armored cover would simply be pushed out by one of the crew members. The driver's observation hatch remained unchanged. On top of the superstructure, there were 4 hatches, 2 at the front and 2 at the rear. The front hatches served as entry points for the driver and the radio operator, while the rear doors provided access to additional storage for spare ammunition. The main gun, crew, and protective folding walls were positioned on top of the superstructure. A round-shaped mount in the center of the compartment allowed the 2-cm Flakvierling to rotate 360 degrees. While driving, these walls were fully raised, and the gun was fixed in position with its 4 barrels raised up. The front and rear plates of the superstructure had 2 small hinged parts that could be swung outwards to fix the side plates at an outward angle. This arrangement allowed more space for the crew during aerial engagements while still providing protection from ground fire. However, engagement of ground targets was only possible when all 4 walls were fully lowered. The Flakpanzer IV had varying levels of armor thickness. The frontal armor hull protection ranged from 50 to 80 mm, the sides were 30 mm, the rear was 20 mm, and the bottom armor was 10 mm thick. The superstructure's frontal armor was 50 mm thick, while the sides were 30 mm thick. The 4 sidewalls protecting the crew and the gun consisted of 2 12mm spaced armor plates. The crew of the Flakpanzer IV consisted of between 5 to 6 members, including the commander, radio operator, gunner, driver, and up to 2 loaders. After the prototype was completed, it was presented to the German Army for inspection in October of 1943. The design was considered sufficient, and a production order for 20 vehicles per month starting from April of 1944 was issued. However, in December of 1943, it was decided to rearm the vehicle with the more powerful 3.7cm Flak 43 anti-aircraft gun. The Germans recognized that their 2cm anti-aircraft gun was becoming less effective against enemy aircraft at higher altitudes. The 3.7cm gun, although with a lower firing rate, offered greater firepower. On January 3, 1944, a meeting took place involving various branches of the Army and including notable figures like Heinz Guderian, Adolf Hitler, and Albert Speer. Hitler himself agreed that the Panzer IV chassis should be used as a temporary solution, and the second version, armed with a 3.7cm gun, should be adopted. An order was issued for the production of 20 such vehicles to be completed in February 1944, with a subsequent monthly production of 20 vehicles. With this, the 3.7cm armed Flakpanzer IV project received a green light. A prototype of the rearmed vehicle was quickly built, reusing the previous vehicle but with the larger gun. After a brief examination, minor changes were requested, primarily related to the weapon mount and a redesign of the gun shield. The redesigned vehicle was designated Flakpanzer IV. However, it gained its nickname Möbelwagen, or furniture van, from the troops who operated it. From March of 1944 to April of 1945, a total of approximately 240 Flakpanzer IVs were produced. The new Flakpanzer IV had some modifications introduced during its production to enhance its performance, functionality, and production efficiency. The Flakpanzer IV utilized the Maybach HL120 TRM engine, slightly modified to produce 272 horsepower at 2800 RPM. The design of the folding walls underwent changes as well. The first prototype had higher sidewalls with inward angles. However, on the 3.7cm Flakpanzer IV, the side armor plate's height was reduced by about 25 centimeters. The first 45 produced vehicles retained slightly curved side armor, but after that, simpler flat armor plates were used. The angle armor provided no significant extra protection, and the flat plates were easier to produce. To accommodate the 3.7cm Flak 43 gun, the lower part of the carriage and the original gun shield were removed. The spent ammunition basket was also smaller due to the reduced working space. Parts of the gun shield were cut off to allow full rotation of the gun, as the original shield hindered its rotation even with the sidewalls lowered. The vehicle carried 400 rounds of ammunition, including 320 high explosive and 80 armor-piercing rounds. The first prototype, armed with a 2cm flak gun, had a flaw where parts of its gun shield had to be cut off to fit inside the fighting compartment. This made the gun fixed and unable to move until the side armor wall was lowered. The 3.7cm armed Flakpanzer IV partially resolved this issue. With the front wall partially or fully lowered, the gun could engage forward targets, albeit with limited firing angles. From Vehicle 201 onwards, the central part of the front wall was cut off to enhance ground target engagement, but this modification was only applied to a small number of vehicles. The armor thickness of the four sidewalls underwent 3 changes. The first group of 20 vehicles had 2 spaced 12mm thick plates. The next 25 vehicles retained the spaced armor, but the thickness was reduced to 10mm. Subsequently, the use of spaced armor was discarded and single-piece 25mm thick armor plates were used instead. The upper angled armor on the sidewalls was also removed to ease production and because it offered little real benefit. The crew of the 3.7cm Flakpanzer IV consisted of 6 members: the commander, 2 gunners, a radio operator, the loader, and the driver. As the first vehicles were completed, they were allocated for the training of crews. These would then be used to equip and form an 8-vehicle-strong Panzer Flakjäger. In June or July of 1944, the first Flakpanzer IV units were attached to several panzer divisions on both the western and eastern fronts. The 9th, 11th, and 116th Panzer Divisions received these vehicles on the Western Front, while the 6th and 19th Panzer Divisions received them on the Eastern Front. However, due to production limitations and logistical constraints, not all 8 vehicles were always issued, and reduced strength units with only 4 vehicles were also formed. In the following months, reduced strength units with 4 Flakpanzer IVs were issued to 10 different panzer brigades serving on both fronts. Later on, mixed units were formed, combining 4 Flakpanzer IVs with 4 Möbelwagens, another type of self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicle, armed with 4 2-centimeter guns housed in a fully rotating turret. It is important to note that these were theoretical strengths. Despite their small production numbers, slightly less than 30 anti-aircraft platoons would be formed during the war. Although there are surviving photographs of the Flakpanzer IV in combat, detailed accounts of its operational service are scarce. This can be attributed to its late introduction and limited production numbers. The Flakpanzer IV was primarily designed for anti-aircraft defense, but it occasionally saw action against ground targets as well. At the start of October 1944, during a reconnaissance mission over Wortum-Mullum in the Netherlands, American P-47 aircraft from the 389th Fighter Squadron were attacking the positions held by the 107th Panzer Brigade, which included some 3.7-centimeter Flakpanzer IVs. During the attack run led by Lieutenant William Grounds, his aircraft was hit by a 3.7-centimeter round, resulting in the destruction of the control cables near the tail and causing a fatal crash. In December 1944, Flakpanzer IVs participated in Operation Northwind, the last major German offensive in the West. The 5th Tank Battalion, which took part in this offensive, had a small number of Flakpanzer IVs in its inventory. However, due to adverse weather conditions, it is unlikely that the Flakpanzer IV saw significant use against aerial targets during this offensive. The Flakpanzer IV also saw action on the Eastern Front. The 20th Panzer Division, heavily involved in the fighting in Hungary in early 1945, had 4 Flakpanzer IVs in its inventory. Some of these vehicles were even employed in the defense of Budapest before being lost in combat. This concludes our video on the Flakpanzer IV Möbelwagen. What is your thought on the German moving van? Do you think the Flakpanzers were worth the effort, or should the Wehrmacht have stuck to its half-tracks? Feel free to share your thoughts on this unique vehicle in the comments section. As always, we here at Tank Encyclopedia appreciate your love and support, so feel free to leave a like and subscribe to know exactly when new content rolls out. If you'd like to buy us some fuel to keep us going, visit us on Patreon or via PayPal. Until next time, stay tuned and keep following our updates.